Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar by Phrase. Today we are doing a bootcamp type of webinar where we show you an hands-on and practical demonstration of how to work with Phrase. And today in particular, we are focusing on the Phrase TMS in the perspective of linguists and people who work in the web editor. Today's speaker and presenter is Randy. He is our solutions engineer at Phrase. Hi, Randy. How are you?
Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, Clara. I'm good. I'm good. Hope everyone's well, and you too. I'm glad to
Thank
be
you.
here.
Great to have you. Thank you very much. So Randy has prepared a demo for you of TMS in the perspective of linguists. So we are going to watch it now, and then we'll be back for live Q&A at the end.
Hello, and welcome to Phrase. In this webinar, we are going to focus on Phrase TMS. In particular, we are going to look at Phrase TMS from the point of view of a linguist working with the translation management system. What I'm sharing here is the Phrase dashboard. So it's the homepage where you can see all products offered by Phrase. In this dashboard, you can also have access to your profile. Let's look at the settings of the profile. You have a set of personal information where you can specify your first name and last name, your username and your email address, and also the appearance of the Phrase UI. Something very important to note here is that you can switch the language of your Phrase instance, and you can, and I would recommend that you do so, specify your time zone. This is very important because it allows you to see meaningful due dates in your jobs and projects, in the jobs and projects that project managers assign to you. In the security tab, you can set your password, of course. You can decide to log in with Google or GitHub or Microsoft. You might want to use two-factor authentication. And then we have the organization tab where you can see the list of organizations you have access to. In this case, I have only access to one organization. And in the last tab, login history, the name is pretty self-explanatory. You can see your login history. Now let's switch to Phrase TMS. When you log into Phrase TMS, you can see a menu on the left where you have the projects view, the jobs view, you have access to translation memories, and you have the settings. So we will skip the settings because this is mostly what we have just looked at in the Phrase platform settings. So let's start by the projects view. You probably already know what a translation project is, right? So a translation project is essentially a folder where you can store any content that you need for translation. So the input content, your translation memory, your term base, and so on and so forth. And then the job would be the file that you need to translate into a specific target language. So let's open a project. This is a view of the projects that are assigned to this specific linguist profile. Let's open one of these projects and see what's inside it. So as you see, inside this project, I have one target language assigned to me and one job assigned to me. When we look at the project, we can see many details. We can see, of course, its name, who has created it, when, if there's a machine translation engine attached to it, what are the source and target languages, of course, and also the domain of the project, for example. We can also access the quote. So usually there should be a quote for us, right? In this case, there's a quote for a minimum price. And we can see the list of translation memories, the list of term bases that are attached to the project. Interestingly, there can be also reference files attached to the project that you can download and look at. So when project managers attach reference files to a project, it's usually material that is useful for you as a linguist to consult in order to perhaps better understand the context for your translation. If we switch to the jobs view, again, we see a list of the jobs that are assigned to us. So this is a list of the jobs that are included in those 3 projects that we have just looked in the projects view. Each job is a file to be translated into a specific target language. The jobs view gives you information about the status of the jobs. So if it's new or if you have already accepted it. It tells you how many words you have in these jobs, the progress, and also to which workflow step this job belongs to. So to better understand the concept of workflow step, let me just switch to a project manager account. This is my project manager account, and let me access a project to show you the concept of workflow steps. So if I open this specific project, you see that I have 3 workflow steps here, one for machine translation, pre-translation, one for post-editing, and one for QA quality assessment. Workflow steps are a convenient way to split your project into multiple steps. You, as a linguist, only have access to the workflow step you are assigned to, or the workflow steps you are assigned to. The project manager will see all workflow steps, of course, and will have full control over which workflow steps are completed, which ones have been already accepted by the different providers. Suppose that you want to work on this file about a smartwatch, I presume. All you have to do is to click on the job. You see that you immediately get a warning telling you that you have to accept the job first to have full access, or otherwise you can open it in read-only mode. So let's do this. So opening it in read-only mode gives you the opportunity to look at the source text and decide whether this is something that you want to work on. So let's have a look. Of course, you see that you cannot edit anything while in read-only mode. You can only have a look at the text and the resources that you have available. Now, suppose that you have looked at the whole file, you see that this is something that you want to work on. All you have to do without going back to the jobs view is click here on Mark Job As and accept the job. Of course, if this is something that you do not want to work on, you could also decline the job. In this case, we're going to accept it. And the project manager is going to be immediately notified that you have accepted to work on this job. Now, let's look at the UI where you are going to perform your translation job. On the left, you have the source text. On the right, you have the target text, which is not populated yet. It might be if you are provided with a job where you already have a pre-translation. Then here, you have a set of views that you can have access to. For now, we will look at the cat view. And the cat view is where you can see what matches you have from the translation memory, from the term base. And in other cases, you might also have machine translation matches. Let's look at this specific case. So here we have a translation memory match of 76%, and then we have a term from the term base, and we have this machine translation output. You might wonder why you have a score also for the machine translation output, because you usually only see scores for translation memory matches, right? This score here is called QPS, Quality Performance Score. It's a score developed by Phrase. It's a proprietary score. And it is a score that tells you how well this target text translates this source text. The closer to 100, the better the translation, of course. So this usually helps you perhaps understand where to place your focus when translating content. Okay, so suppose that I'm fine with this target text. I just need to insert tags here. So all I have to do is to click here on insert tag at the beginning and at the end, just add some text here. Right, now I can confirm the segment and store it into the translation memory. Now let's try to add a term to the term base, because maybe you might want to add fitness as a term to the term base. What you can do here is just click on the plus icon here, the plus button, add a new term, and perhaps you want to translate it into Italian with the same English term, okay? So now you can decide if all these options to match the term on the source text as fuzzy, as exact match, and on the target if it's a preferred term, a forbidden term, and so on. If this is all good, you just click on add, and the term is going to be added to your term base. It's going to be with status new until someone with the necessary rights access the term base and confirms it. Some other popular options that you have in the UI include the possibility to split or join segments. So here I have split my segment into parts. We can also decide to join segments here. So let's join it back, because we've seen that splitting it was not a good idea, perhaps. You might have noticed that there's also an in-context view here. So let me show to you how it works. You can have a look at the images. You can also switch to different parts of the document, and this is going to switch to the relevant segment in the cat. You might want to look at the target text. You might want to look at the source text, but anyways, this is usually very useful because it saves you a lot of time when you translate, especially into languages where the target text tends to be longer than the source. So you can look, for example, at the title and see if your translation is breaking the layout. Or you can look at the document and the images and get more context about what you are going to translate. While working on a job, you can also filter segments. For example, you might want to look at segments containing specific words. So I can filter on the source, but also on the target. We might want to see all segments containing a specific term in the target. You can also filter based on a segment status, based on the source of the pre-translation, based on who modified or created the segment and when, who and when added a comment to the segment. The comment section is something that we are going to look at in a few seconds. And if there are changes in the workflows tab and so on and so forth, you can also sort segments. When you look for a specific word, for example, you might want to specify if you want the search to match the case, or if you want to use a regular expression, for example, or if you want to look at the text or at other fields. Now let's look at the different panes that you can access on the right. So we have looked at the cat pane. Now let's switch to the concordance search. Here is where you want to go when you want, for example, to look for specific occurrences of a specific term. So let me look, for example, at smartwatch. You see that I have an occurrence in my term base. We have already seen that. And I have a few segments that are stored in the translation memory. In the QA pane, we can run the QA checks on the segments that we have just produced. You might have the possibility to run all checks at the end of the project, of course. So here you click on run all checks, and you are going to get a report of the QA issues. Of course, here we've just translated 2 segments. So we are going to get a lot of empty target, right? In some other cases, the project manager might enforce the instant QA check. The instant QA check is a way to make sure that you cannot confirm a segment until all QA issues in the target segment are resolved. So let's go back to this segment here. For example, if I change, let me switch to the cat pane. So you can see that I have here a term-based occurrence, right? This is also highlighted in the source text. If I try and change the term to something else that is not compliant with the term base and confirm the segment, I immediately get a warning telling me that there's a missing term here for this specific segment. So I have to fix it before I am actually able to confirm the segment. And now I get a spelling warning because the dictionary does not recognize the word smartband, but in this case, I can just ignore it because this is just what the term base is asking me to do. And now I can confirm my segment. So it really depends on how your project manager wants you to work. This instant QA might be enabled or disabled. Sometimes the project managers can decide that linguists have the right to ignore QA checks. In some other cases, project managers might decide that linguists do not have the rights to do so. So it really depends on how you're used to work with your clients. Okay. Now, before we continue our tour of the panes here on the right, let me switch to another job so that we can also see a job with a different workflow and perhaps a job where I have already pre-translated a good amount of the content. So you see, I have this job here that has been already accepted and I have already translated the whole content. I haven't completed it yet though. Suppose that we are looking at it one last time before completing the job. I already have confirmed all my segments here on the right. In this case, the job was assigned to me in the second workflow step. The second workflow step is the post-editing one, and the first workflow step was the pre-translation one. So the first workflow step has been carried out by the translation manager, who has then assigned me to the second workflow step. This is where you can check what has been changed in each workflow step. For example, if I open this segment here, we see the target text produced in the first workflow step, the machine translation one, the target text produced in the second workflow step, which is the workflow step I am working on right now. And here you can also look at the track changes, who changed the text, and when. In the More Languages pane, you can have access to the translations done by the other translators working on this project. So you're working on the English to Italian job. In this project, we have other two jobs, one English into Arabic and one for English into German. So you can, for example, look for portions of text and see if this has been translated by one of your colleagues. For example, here, the German translation is ready, so we can have a look. And this is usually useful for linguists because it might give you more information. Perhaps it can clarify a context that you were not able to disambiguate, or it might be useful even just for the sake of make sure that you are translating into Italian consistently with what has been done in German. Speaking of consistencies, just a reminder, we have touched on the reference files that project managers can attach to a project. The reference files can also be accessed from here. A few minutes ago, I was mentioning the comments section. Here I am in the comments pane. One nice thing about the comments in the UI, Cat Web Editor UI of Phrase is that you can attach a comment to one or more segments. For example, here I might want to specify a set of segments that I want to attach a comment to, leave a comment, and you can also mention the specific user you want to address this comment to. For example, as soon as you use the symbol to add the mention, you get the list of users that are working on this project, and you also have information about who is doing what in the project. So this is the current user that we are looking at, and it's the post-editing provider. So this is the job that is assigned to us. And then we have this other linguist here is the quality assessment provider. So this is the linguist that is going to check our translation and make sure that everything is correct. So perhaps we want to provide a comment and say, I am not 100% sure about the context of this segment. And we can send it to the QA provider along with other comments that I had already added. So this QA provider is going to have a look at a few comments that I left for her. Speaking of QA provider, we have the LQA pane here. We won't look at this right now because we want to stick to this real world scenario in which we are doing the translation. We were assigned the post-editing task, right? So now we have translated the whole content. All segments are confirmed. So what we do as a linguist assigned to the post-editing task is mark the job as completed. So this is the official way to let our project manager know that we have completed the task, and this task is then going to be assigned to the provider of the LQA. Let me just switch for a second to my project manager account just to show you what it looks like on the project manager side. So this is the project that we were looking at. Now, if I refresh the page, we will see that in the post-editing workflow step, the Italian job is now completed. And now we have the quality assessment step that has been emailed to this other provider. So now let us switch to the profile of the linguist assigned to the quality assessment job. The quality assessment job is here in my list. Again, if I try and open it, it tells me that I have to accept it first. So this time, let's say that we want to accept it immediately. Now I can open the job and start my LQA. So here we have the list of segments, and we can switch to the LQA pane and click on Start LQA. This is going to give us access to the resources that we need to carry out the LQA segment by segment, of course. When you click on a segment, you can select an error category from the ones available in the taxonomy. The taxonomy might change. So in this case, we have accuracy, design, fluency, locale convention, style, and terminology. But why I'm saying that it might change? Well, because it can be customized by the organization that you are working for, by your customer. So they can choose to have a different error taxonomy and different penalties assigned to each error. In this case, let's say that we have an accuracy error with a major severity. For sure, there is a punctuation error here. Check the punctuation. We can leave a comment. And when the issue is repeated, we can decide, for example, to flag it in subsequent repetitions as a repeated issue. In this case, we're going to flag it only in this segment. So you see that now we have the LQA symbol here telling us it's not grayed out anymore. So it's telling us that there's an LQA issue here. Let's add a couple of more just to show you perhaps a little bit more of how it works. In this case, let's pretend that there is a critical fluency error and we flag the issue. And then here we can add a terminology error, critical as well, and flag the issue, and so on and so forth. And for each segment where we flag issues, we also have to confirm segments to be able to complete the job. This time, let's pretend that we have done the whole job. So I can select all segments and confirm them. And now we can click on Finish LQA. So once the LQA is finalized, once the LQA is completed, you get a score on the job level. So this score, in this case, is telling us that we have failed the LQA because the pass or fail threshold was 99%, and we got an 89% point, 22. So lower than the threshold. And again, this score depends on the LQA profile that is applied by the organization that you are working for. Let's complete the LQA job. So now if I go back to the jobs here and refresh the page, we see that the LQA job is completed. And if I try to access it, I get a warning telling me that we have already completed the job. So we can only open it in read-only mode. So this is what happens when you complete the job. You get, you lose full access to the job and you only have read-only access to it. Now, before we switch to other views that linguists have access to in TMS, let me switch to another account to show you some other file formats that we support. Of course, we do support any Office format. IDML is also supported, and we've just looked at an IDML file, actually. We also support other formats such as JSON, XML, HTML, and .po. This is just a small sample of the file formats that we support. Something that can be interesting to know is that we also support formats such as JSON files containing ICUs. For those of you who don't know, ICU is a syntax typically used for internationalization and localization formats. It's a syntax used to specify, for example, different translations based on the plural forms in the source text. Let me just show you how it works in Phrase TMS. So, for example, here we have 3 different versions of the same source sentence, depending on the plural forms. So here you have one unread message, you have many unread messages, or you have a specific number of unread messages. Of course, this is just a very, very silly example just to show you that we support IC. The same goes for different versions of a segment based on the pronoun to be used. If these formats are of any interest for you because you perhaps work with customers translating websites, translating mobile apps, translating video games, I would recommend to perhaps also be here for the second webinar tomorrow that is going to be focused on phrase strings. Phrase strings is the localization tool offered by Phrase that is specifically built for the localization of key value file formats. So the file formats that are usually used for the localization of websites and mobile apps or video games. So we're almost there for today. Before we switch to the Q&A session, I just want to show you the last view that we haven't looked at here, the translation memories view, where you have access to the translation memories. In this case, my user here has full access to translation memories, which means that the user can search through the translation memory, look at all segments, and can also delete segments, for example. This depends on the rights assigned to you by your organization. So you might have access, read-only access to translation memories, which means that you can search through the translation memory, but you cannot change anything. Another way to look at the translation memories and the turn bases assigned to you in a specific project is to switch to the projects view, open a project where you have a translation memory and a turn base, click on the specific translation memory and search through it. And the same goes for the turn base. Again, in this case, my user has full access to the turn bases. So the user can not only see the turn base, its content, but the user can also add terms to the term base. In other cases, you might only have access to the term-based content without the possibility to edit it. Now, suppose that you become a Phrase user. Perhaps you are already a Phrase user. I do hope that you all become Phrase user after this webinar, of course. If you notice something that you need help with, or if you notice something that in your opinion could be improved because a specific feature is missing, for example, you can click on the Help and Resources button here on the top left, on the bottom left, sorry. And you can get help, for example, reaching out to our support team via chat or also via the form in our help center. You can directly visit our help center where you will find lots of useful articles, how-to articles on how to set up new features in Phrase, or articles that explain how the features are supposed to work. And you also have access to tutorials, to webinars, and so on and so forth, or to legal documents. So this concludes our tour of the Phrase TMS platform. I hope this was clear enough. If it wasn't, or if I haven't covered anything you might be interested in, please feel free to ask questions during the Q&A session.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Randy, for the demo. And before we go into the questions, I just wanted to mention, because we just spent 30 minutes in Phrase TMS, and Randy covered some basics and an overview of what you might use to get started with Phrase TMS. But maybe you are interested in a little bit more of a deep dive and you want to get really proficient. So I wanted to mention our courses on what we call a Phrase Academy. You can have a look at what we offer at phrase.com/academy, and you can have a look through the courses that we currently offer. As an example, you can see on the screen that we currently have a Phrase TMS Linguist certification, which gives you 5 hours of training content and then an option to gain a certificate at the end of it. So taking this course is an excellent opportunity to not only get even better and more proficient in using Phrase TMS, but also then have a certificate that you can add to your CV or your LinkedIn profile and just show and prove that you are a proficient Phrase TMS user. We also have courses specialized on the project management type of work, on AI, MT, etc. So go check it out if you're interested. Let's have a look at the questions. I'm going to put them on the screen, and let's start from the top. George is asking, if I want to have pre-translation filled in the editor in the target segments, can I set it up myself, or do I need to ask the project manager to do it? Randy.
Yeah, that's a good question. So you can definitely perform the pre-translation yourself. Of course, if the target is empty, right? Then what you can use for pre-translation depends on the rights assigned to you. Because, for example, when your project manager creates a user for you, the project manager can decide to activate machine translation for your user. So can activate access to machine translation for your users or deactivate it. If it's activated, you can pre-translate using machine translation plus translation memory. If MT is not activated, of course, you can launch pre-translation, but it will only rely on the translation memory. So it can you can launch pre-translation. What you can use for pre-translation depends on the rights assigned to you by the project manager.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I guess this is correct for multiple areas of what we can do in the editor. A lot of it depends on the rights that the project manager has given to us. And I know we have sometimes heard from users about some feature requests or something that they weren't happy about not having in the tool, but then it turned out that it was just a matter of settings, and basically the first step is always to ask the project manager if things can be set up in a different way, maybe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Next question. In Phrase, my home organization is always set to a single company. Since there's no option to change it, I miss out on projects because I have to switch manually. By the time I do, someone else has already accepted the job in the other organization. Is this a limitation of Phrase?
So yeah, this is how it works in Phrase. You would have to switch from one organization to the other. The reason behind that is that we want to make sure that when you look at your jobs, you know what organization they belong to, right? Because otherwise the risk is that in a single page, you would see jobs coming from different organizations, which can also be perhaps an issue. For example, if you share your screen, share any information related to your screen to someone else, and you have there multiple jobs that belong to different organizations. So yeah, this is just how it works. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that right now.
Thank you. And I see a follow-up question. Is it possible to change the home organization? So by default, when the user logs in, that they see organization?
So the organization you have access to by default is the one that, let me think about it. So I think by default, you have access to the main organization. So to the organization that, to the first organization you had access to. So there's no way to set a default organization. You will have access to the first organization you were added to by default, and then every time you log in again into Phrase, you are going to have access to the most recent organization you access to the organization you were working for last time you logged in into Phrase. So this is how it would work.
Okay, thank you. Next question, is it possible if I'm uploading a CSV to divide rows from that file into separate jobs? For example, each row a separate job in Phrase.
So there are a few options here. I'm not sure whether what you're the reason why you're asking is that you have multilingual CSV files. If that's the case, when you create a new job, there's a specific option to upload a multilingual CSV file. The same goes for Excel sheets, where you can specify, for example, that column A contains English, column B contains German, column C contains Japanese, and so on and so forth. And this is going to create a different job for each of the languages. And then once you export your final file, it will contain a single file, will contain all of the languages together. So this is if you're interested in a multilingual format. If not, if you just have like different columns that you want to import and you want to import them in a different job, that's also possible, because when you import a CSV, you can specify which column specifically you want to add to a specific job. So you can import first column A, and this would be one job, and then column B, and that would be a second job, and so on and so forth. So these are the two options that you have in case it's multilingual or monolingual CSV.
Okay. And what seems to be the last question for now, is it possible to download files by batches and not by languages?
I'm not sure what you mean by deliver, but anyways, yes, in our interface, you can select multiple jobs and perform an action in batches. So this is possible. It doesn't need to be, they don't need to be jobs in the same language. They can be jobs in different languages, and you can select multiple ones, for example, and accept them or complete them so they are delivered back to your project manager.
Would this be done from the jobs view? Maybe
Yes, exactly.
you can also share your screen, maybe, Randy, if you want to go.
Yeah, sure. Let me just share my screen here and switch to a linguist profile. So I have my linguist profile here, and I have multiple jobs. Here they are all with the same language combination, but this is just because I wanted to show you like a real world example, right? Because usually if you are a linguist, you work translating into a specific target language. So this is the only reason why everything is in the same target language. But so you can pick multiple jobs and perform actions in batches, right? So here, for example, these are all accepted jobs, right? So I can complete them all in one go. Now I can do this because some of these jobs contain some segments that are unconfirmed, but this can be done in batches, right? Of course, if I do this and I select also this one, the complete job is going to be grayed out, but the reason is that this job is still new, so you would have to accept it first before being able to complete it. But anyways, yes, it's not, it doesn't depend on the languages. You can perform batch operations on your jobs.
Yeah, it's great also to see that, you know, Phrase doesn't let you deliver a job that has not been done yet. So you have these checks there for you. Okay, so I don't see any other questions in Slido, so I consider this done and finished. So thank you so much, Randy. I'm just going to quickly paste a link to the registration page for the webinar tomorrow, where we'll be looking at strings. So anyone who's interested, please join us there. And if not, I will see you some other time. Thank you, Randy, and have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.